Chapter 2 of Tractate Kesubos discusses further laws of marriage and the marriage contract. The first Mishnah says, if a woman was widowed or divorced, meaning she collects her marriage contract at that point, and she claims she was married as a virgin, meaning she should receive the full 200 zuz coins, while those paying claim she was married as a widow, meaning she'd only be paid 100. If we have witnesses that by her wedding she was sent out with a hinuma, which will be defined, or with her hair down, and some say if parched grain was given out, as was the custom if the woman was a virgin, meaning there are proofs that at the time of the wedding she was a virgin, she's now paid the full 200 zuz. Another point, if somebody goes to a man and says he bought a field from his father, he's believed, as this guy was unaware of the field in the first place, so the only proof it was ever owned by somebody else is from the person who owns it. However, if there are other witnesses that it was owned by the other person's father, he's not automatically believed if he says he bought it from him. The Gemara debates the logic of the first case. The implication seems to be, as the woman has witnesses, that if there were no witnesses, she wouldn't be believed. This would be different from a case from the prior chapter where the woman was believed, according to the opinion that it was a definite claim, which overrides an uncertain claim, as our case is a definite claim versus a definite claim, essentially, as most women marry when they're a virgin. Based on this, there's also a question as to what the other opinion, which references the concept of migoi, the notion that somebody would be more likely to be believed if they had the option of giving a more easily believable testimony and instead chose to bring the one they brought, is exactly referring to in the earlier chapter. There are several suggested cases brought. It also suggests that although majority of women marry as a virgin, this wouldn't help here, as typically it's also public knowledge, unlike by this case. It also says there's no concern of the woman reusing the Kesubos contract in different courts, as possibly we write a receipt, possibly because this is a situation where the contract isn't written. This is further discussed. It also mentions several different practices that were done by the weddings of virgins, such as passing a cup of teruma wine, a barrel of wine, and also singing and dancing was done. There's also debate between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai if we praise a bride on her beauty at her wedding, even if she's not actually beautiful. It lists a few others of such blessings, and it talks about the importance of dancing before the bride and groom at their wedding. It also says we hold it's not allowed for people to gaze at the bride during the 7 days of celebration. It also says if there's an entourage carrying a corpse, they're diverted for a bride and a corpse, and a bride is diverted for a king. A king, Agrippas, once diverted himself for a bride, and it's debated if this was proper. It's said that it was at a crossroads, so it was fine. It mentions other obligations by a wedding or funeral. It says many shofars were blown to honor the dead. The amounts are debated. Also, the definition of a hinuma is either a myrtle canopy or a veil. It discusses other things done at weddings if the bride was a virgin. The next point was by the field case. It said a case where the man claimed he purchased the field from the other man's father and not from the man himself, unbeknownst to him, as that case doesn't really work for listed reasons. This is discussed. It also discusses the effectiveness of a legal protest not lodged in the occupant's presence, if this is effective, which is debated. It also proposes other cases it could have discussed, but rejects them based off of individual issues, and it's further qualified. New Mishnah, if witnesses certifying a document say this was our handwriting, but we were coerced to sign, or we were minors when we signed it, or we were otherwise unfit to testify, they're believed, as the only person suggesting that it was legitimate was also themselves. If, however, there were witnesses that it was signed by them or otherwise verified, they're not believed if they try to disqualify their own testimony. The Gemara suggests that if they say that they signed the document under threat of death, they'd still be believed even if their signatures had been verified by a third party. This is rejected as witnesses who testified cannot re-testify to retract their prior testimony. Rather, what it means to say is that if the witnesses testify that they falsified their testimony because of a threat to their finances, they're not believed, as there's a rule that a person cannot establish themselves in court as a criminal. There are related points. It quotes an opinion that says witnesses who authenticate their signatures on a document are not believed to invalidate it. This is because the document is valid even without their certification, as the individual conceded that he had drafted it. It also holds that if somebody has a debt document that he said was written on trust, he's not believed. There's debate as to what kind of document exactly he's referring to, and there are related cases discussed. Furthermore, if witnesses have signed the document and died, new witnesses can't appear to contradict the validity of the original testimony, as it's the two witnesses versus each other now. So the current status just remains as it is. We bring sources. In regards to certifying the validity of a document, some say you can only compare it to a document that was challenged and verified. But some say you can also compare it to two Kesubos marriage contracts or bills of sale of two fields, provided that the owners used the fields peacefully for 3 years after, and this is assuming the documents were procured by somebody other than the person whose document is actually being questioned. And there are further points on the laws of written testimony. It also discusses some laws of impurity, which we use to teach that a witness can testify on something he saw up to 60 years ago. Others say it should be more, as people will take care to remember something that they need to testify on. New Mishnah: if two witnesses verify their handwriting and their fellows, it's valid. If each person can only validate their own handwriting, some say they need to get another person to verify their handwriting, others say their testimony is sufficient. The Gemara debates exactly what this case is referring to. It also cites an opinion that if two people are witnesses and one of them dies, two new people must authenticate the signatures and one can't be the original witness. If there's one new witness, then the surviving witness should just write his signature on a shard, so that way it can't be used afterwards for forgery by others, and it will then be used to verify his original signature. It's said that we rule that the two witnesses can just verify themselves. It lists a few unique related cases. Furthermore, some say a witness and the judge can combine to authenticate signatures, but this is rejected. There are other specific cases brought, and these are qualified for the New Mishnah. If a woman says, "I was married and got divorced," she's believed, as she's the only source of this information. If there are witnesses, however, that testify that she was married, she's not automatically believed that she was divorced. Similarly, if a woman says she was held captive but remains pure, she's believed because she's the only source of this information. If there are witnesses that say she was held captive, we don't automatically believe her if she says that she's pure. If these witnesses came after she married, she nevertheless doesn't need to leave her husband. The Gemara cites sources for these rulings, and it also cites some particular cases. There are further particular cases brought. Some say if two witnesses say a man died and two witnesses say he did not, the man's wife cannot remarry. If she did, she can stay married. If two witnesses say a woman was divorced and two say she was not, she cannot remarry, and if she did, now she would actually need to divorce. There are a few suggested differences between these cases. The first is that it was actually one witness testifying by both cases, where there's a special exception to believe that the husband died, or it's that there's a stricter opinion accepted by divorce, as she can contradict the husband's claim if he says he didn't divorce her, so long as there are no witnesses, or it's that the witnesses testify that the death or divorce happened today, which can't be verified by the dead husband, but it can just be verified by the divorce, as they could just have her show the divorce document that she should have received. And there are further particular cases discussed. The other points are further qualified, along with bringing some instances of a few actual cases. New Mishnah: if two women were held captive and they testify about themselves that they're pure, they're not believed. They are believed if they testify about each other. The Gemara discusses some related particular instances. If a woman testifies about herself, saying she was made captive and violated, she's believed. If she says she's pure, she's believed, so long as there aren't other witnesses to testify to her captivity. If a woman testifies that another captive was violated, she's not believed, unless witnesses testify to their captivity and there are no witnesses that say she wasn't violated. If a woman testifies that another captive is pure, she's believed, regardless as to what the other witnesses testify. New Mishnah: if two men testify about themselves that they are Kohanim, they are not believed. They are believed if they testify about each other. Some say we can't make somebody a Kohen based on one witness. Others say that's only if it's contested. Others say we can, even if it's based on one witness. The Gemara explains the necessity of these cases, and they're further discussed. It also debates the evidence level required to elevate somebody to be a Kohen. It's debated if you can use documents, or if it's just based on the fact that he, at some point, said the priestly blessing. It tries to bring many further proofs for the latter point, which are further discussed. There are additional suggestions brought, attempted proofs from having seen the individual reading from the Kohen portion of the Torah and similar. It also says that casual speech could work to establish somebody as being a Kohen. It gives an instance of a man who casually mentions that his father would give him teruma, a tithe, which can only be eaten if you're a Kohen, when he was younger, and he was therefore established to be a Kohen based on that. And there are further similar points brought, and it debates of having received Ma'aser Rishon tithes, if that's sufficient proof, and that's further discussed. New Mishnah: if a woman is imprisoned by people who worshipped idols, if it was for monetary matters, she can be with her husband after her release. If it was for capital punishment, she can't be with her husband if she gets freed. The Gemara clarifies, if the Jewish people are actually ruled over by these people, then she's not allowed to be with her husband in either case. And there are some other instances discussed, along with some additional points. New Mishnah: if a city fell to a siege, all wives of Kohanim within can no longer be with their husbands, unless they have witnesses that they weren't attacked. We'd even believe a slave or slave woman's testimony here. We don't, however, believe somebody's testimony on themselves. The Gemara says that, unlike by the woman, there's no concern that they used wine barrels for idolatrous libations, as there'd be no time. It also clarifies that this is a city besieged by a different kingdom, not by a city besieged by its own same kingdom. And there's no concern of somebody slipping past the army into the city, as it's sufficiently guarded in this case. Some say if there's even a single hiding spot in the whole city, all of the women within are presumed to not have been attacked and violated. There are related points discussed. It also argues that if a woman says, although there was a valid hiding spot, she didn't use it, but she still wasn't attacked, she's in that case believed. It further clarifies which testimony is accepted by such a situation. New Mishnah, there was a sage who survived the Roman siege of Jerusalem, and he swore that he had stayed with his wife the entire time, and she was not attacked. But he was told that a person still can't testify on his behalf. The Gemara discusses related points, and there are further related laws here discussed. New Mishnah, the following are believed in their testimony of something they saw back when they were a minor. Somebody who testifies on the handwriting of his father, teacher, or brother, the fact that a wedding occurred in a manner typically done for a virgin bride, that somebody did things that implied he was a Kohen, or that a location is a plowed over graveyard in regards to the laws of impurity. He is not trusted by monetary claims, like that somebody had a path through a region, or a designated eulogizing spot or similar. The Gemara says that all of this applies if there's also an adult testifying along with him. The remaining points are qualified, and it explains why these testimonies are believed, such as that generally most women marry as virgins anyways, whether a person was a slave or not, and the points on eating teruma to verify that he's a Kohen. The remaining points are also further discussed. And that's the end of chapter 2.